Hi, boys and girls. I hope this video finds you well on this day 9 of e-learning. Let's take a look at our agenda for today. First, we'll review the standards that this lesson touches on and our objectives. Then we'll do an interactive read, and lastly, you'll do some independent work. So let's get started, shall we? In our day 9 e-learning packet, it says that the first standard we'll be touching on is R.I.5.1. It says ask and answer literal and inferential questions to determine meaning. Refer explicitly to the text to support inferences and conclusions. So let's dive a little deeper into what literal and inferential mean. Now, in class, we've discussed this over and over again, so this should be an easy review. As we've discussed in class before, literal means following the ordinary or the usual meaning of the word. So whatever the word says is what it means. And inferential means the process of making a generalization based on information you already know. For example, if in the passage it says that the girl's eyes were watering and she had a frown on her face, you can infer that the girl was what? That's right, sad. The standard also asks us to explicitly refer to the text to support inferences and conclusions. Explicitly means the exact meaning of something is clearly stated. So what that means is we're going to look exactly at what the text is saying to find proof of our inferences and the conclusions we made. Let's take a look at standard R.I.8.2. It says use knowledge of appendices, timelines, maps, and charts to locate information and gain meaning. Explain how these features contribute to a text. I remember when we read a book about a bird who migrated, and it told us the distance in numbers, but we didn't truly understand how far the distance of where the bird flew from and to was until we saw a map. So we're going to use that type of knowledge of appendices, timelines, and maps and charts to locate information and to gain meaning. We're also going to be able to explain how those features contribute to a text. And lastly, the standard we're touching on is R.L.9.1. Identify and explain how the author uses idioms, metaphor, or personification to shape meaning and style. Here's a little review about what an idiom is. Idioms are commonly used expressions whose meanings do not relate to the literal meaning of each word. Well, we just discussed that literal means exactly what it says. So an idiom is an expression whose meaning does not mean exactly what it says. For example, this little girl right here, it says juggling is a piece of cake. That doesn't mean that when you juggle, you have a slice of cake in your hand. It means juggling is easy. Take a look at the second example. It says, it completely slipped my mind. Does that mean that it was on his mind and it slipped off? No, that would be silly and literal. This is an idiom, and it uses an expression that is not literal. So what it completely slipped my mind means is I forgot. Let's take a look at metaphors. Remember, metaphors compare two things by saying one is the other. For example, these two kids, it says we are two peas in a pod. Now we all know that peas are little, tiny, and green. So if we were literal, we would say, that's not true. They aren't two peas in a pod, but it's a metaphor. It's a metaphor. It's using a different type of language to express a meaning. So we're going to identify and explain how the author uses idioms, metaphors, and personification to shape meaning and style. I remember personification from the last couple of classes. Look at the word personification. What word is inside? Person. That's correct. So personification is when something that is not a person is doing something that a person would do. For example, in the book How to Be Perfect in 3 Days, there was a part of the passage that said it looked like the book jumped off the shelf, grabbed me by the arms, and shook me and said, "Read me." Now, that isn't something a book could do. That's something a person would do. So that is an example of personification. Now let's look at our objectives. What's another word for objective? That's right, an objective is a goal. So here are our goals for this lesson. I can use the text to answer questions. I can find the answer within the text and make inferences to find the answers to questions. That's our first goal. Next, I can use the text features in a text to help me gain meaning from the text. That's our second goal. I can use text features. And here's just a little reminder about what text features are. Text features are things like titles and headings, pictures and captions, charts and graphs, timelines, bold letters, italic letters, the title page, maps, glossary, index, and table of contents. Those are just a few examples of text features. So another goal of ours today is to be able to use those types of things to help gain meaning from the text. And our last goal for today is I can determine the meaning of figurative language in a text. What does figurative language mean? Well, that's simple. Figurative language simply means when you use a word or a phrase that does not have its normal everyday literal meaning. So it's just the same thing as using metaphors and similes, personification, and those other types of figurative language that we were speaking of earlier. So figurative language is when you use a word or a phrase that does not have its normal everyday literal meaning. All right, so back to the task at hand. Our essential question is, how is Victor Ochoa's new idea helpful? It says, read the passage, use an answer question strategy, use the ask and answer question strategy to be sure you understand what you read. So that means all throughout the passage, we're going to ask and answer questions to make sure that we understand what we read. Now, just taking a quick glance at the passage, I already see things like bold heading. There's another bold heading. And another, and then look over here. Here's a caption. What did we call those just a few minutes ago? We said those were examples of text features. Did you guess it? And I remember that one of our goals was to be able to use the text features in the text to help gain meaning. So already we're a step ahead. Let's get started. Victor Ochoa's new idea. Have you ever made something that no one else had made before? It is not an easy thing to do. People who make something new are called inventors. They look around and see what can be made better, and then they do it. Victor Ochoa was one of those people. He made many things. One of them was a flying machine. Victor looked at birds to get his ideas. He wanted to learn everything about how birds flew. Many jobs. I wonder how that heading, that text feature, is going to help us understand this passage more. Let's read on to find out. Victor was born in Mexico in 1850 and grew up in Texas. He lived all over the United States. He loved to work with writers. He wrote for newspapers. He even started 2 new papers. He worked hard and never gave up, no matter how hard the job was. Ooh, he sounds like a leader. At Burnside, we work hard and then we get to play hard. But let's continue reading. A new plane. That's another heading, another text feature. Victor's mind was a motor that never turned off. A motor that never turned off. That sounds like an example of figurative language. Was his head really a motor? Did he have to oil it? And it never turned off? Did he have an off switch? No. What does that mean then? Remember we said that metaphors was when they compared two things by saying one is the other. So in this situation, it says his mind was a motor. So it's comparing his mind to a motor. So what does it mean? What do you think? Victor's mind was a motor that never turned off. He was always thinking of new ways to make life better. In 1908, he was thinking about the way that birds fly. He thought that he could make a plane that flew like a bird. So he set to work. He made a goal and he went to accomplish it. The center of the plane was made of two bikes set next to each other. It looked a little like a car. It had a small motor that sat between the two bikes. The back was shaped like a bird's tail. The wings were made of canvas and steel pipes. What made this plane different was that the wings could be folded down just like a bird's wings. This was so it could be put in a small shed or barn. This way, everyone could keep a plane at a house or on a farm. I was visualizing it, but because they have this right here, this text feature, now I don't have to visualize it anymore. I know exactly what it looked like. Victor started a company that would make this new plane. He asked the Navy to use his new plane. He wrote the Navy a letter telling them why he thought his plane would be just what they needed. He worked very hard to make his plane work. He worked on it for over 20 years. No one knows if it ever flew. Other new ideas. Victor did not let this problem keep him from making other things. Making new things from new ideas was the blood in his veins. Making new things from new ideas was the blood in his veins. That sounds like another example of figurative language. He made a new pen that held its own ink. Another thing he came up with was a motor that worked both forward and backwards. Ooh, he's a hard worker. Never give up. Victor was a spinning top. A spinning top. There are examples of figurative language all throughout this piece. He was always making new things. He wanted to help other people with his ideas. Not all of his ideas worked. No one who tries something new is successful every time, though. The important part is to keep trying. Victor Ochoa was someone who never stopped trying. That sounds like something us third grade teachers tell you guys all the time. No one who tries something new is successful every time. The important part is to keep trying. All right, so you will go back, reread the passage, and answer the questions. Then you will answer a reading response question. And it says, what is the central idea of the passage? Central idea? What does that mean? Do you know? Well, I'll tell you. The central idea of a passage is another way of saying what is the main idea of a passage. And here's a few clues on how to find it. When you're looking for the main idea, first you need to know the topic. You need to choose one or two words about what the whole text is about. Not just a little bit, not just the beginning or just the middle or the end, but what the whole text was about. All right? That's your topic. Then for your main idea, you determine what was the most important point or thought about the topic. Okay, so if you look over here, it says after you read, think about the most important point about the topic. And I know while we were reading, I remember saying some things over and over again. What details or examples back up and support the main idea? That goes back to one of our goals, being able to use that text to refer explicitly back to the text to support our answers. So you'll answer the reading response question, what is the central ideal of the passage? Or in other words, what's the main ideal of the passage? Then you'll read this short text. It says it's on genre and text feature. We know what text features are, right? Because we just spoke about it. These are text features. So you'll read about George Crumb's potato chip. Then you'll answer the questions. And next you have this two-part question. It says, read each sentence from the passage, then write what two things are being compared in the metaphor of the lines. We remember what metaphors are, right? Metaphors compare two things by saying one is the other. For example, we are two peas in a pod. So you'll read each sentence from the passage, then you'll write what two things are being compared in the metaphor on the lines. For example, Victor's mind was a motor that never turned off. We discussed that earlier. That should be an easy question for you. Then part B says reread the passage, use what you've learned to write two metaphors based on the life of Victor Ochoa. You can do that. That's easy. Next, you'll do your vocabulary, and you'll be done with the reading portion of the lesson. So, before I say goodbye, let's go back and review our goals. Today, our goal was to determine the meaning of figurative language in a text. Did we determine what some of those things meant, like the motor? His head was a motor? Yes. So we put a big old check by that. Another objective of ours was I can use the text features in a text to help me gain meaning from the text. Oh, there was a lot of text features in this text. And we used them to understand what it was talking about. We used it to understand what it was talking about. So that's another check. And lastly, it said I can use the text to answer questions. I can find the answer within the text and make inferences to find answers to the questions. Did we do that? Yes, we certainly used the text to answer questions that we thought about. So we met all our goals for today. Now you can continue on with your independent work and then enjoy the rest of your day. See you guys later. Bye.